The Looking Glass by Anton Chekhov. New Year away, Nele, the daughter of a landowner and general, a young and pretty girl, dreaming day and night of being married, was sitting in her room, gazing with exhausted, half closed eyes into the looking glass. She was pale, tense, and motionless as the looking glass. The non-existent but apparent vista of a long, narrow corridor with endless rows of candles, the reflection of her face, her hands of the frame, all this was already clouded in mist and merged into a boundless grey sea. The sea was undaunting, gleaming, and now and then flaring garrison. Looking at Nellie's motionless eyes and pale lips, one could hardly say whether she was asleep or awake, but nevertheless she was seeing. At first she saw only the smile and soft, charming expression of someone's eyes. Then, against the shifting grey background, there gradually apparent the outlines of head, a face, eyebrows, beard. It was he, the distant one, the object of long dreams and hopes. The distant one was for Nelly everything. The significance of life, personal happiness, career, fate, outside him, as on the grey background of the looking glass, all was dark, empty, meaningless, and so it was not strange that, seeing before her husband gently smiling face, she was conscious of bliss, of an utterably sweet dream that could not be expressed in speech or on paper. Then she heard his voice, saw herself living under the same roof with him. Her life merged into his. Months and years flew by against the grey background, and Nele saw her future distinctly in all its details. Picture followed picture against the grey background. The Nele saw herself one winter night knocking at the door of Dr. Stephen Lukic, the district doctor. The old dog hoarsely and lazingly barked behind the gate. The doctor's windows were in darkness. All was silence. For God's sake, whispered Nelly. But at last the garden gate cracked and the Nelly saw the doctor's cook. Is the doctor at home? His honor's asleep, whispered the cook into her slave, as though afraid of waking her master. He's only just got home from his fever patients and gave order he was not be waked. But Nelly scarcely heard the cook. Thrusting her aside, she rushed headlong into the doctor's house, running through some dark and stuffy rooms. Upsetting two or three chairs, she at last reached the doctor's bedroom. Stephen Lukic was lying on his bed, dressed but without his coat, and with puting lips was breathing into his open hand. A little night lad gleamed finely beside him. Without uttering a word, Nelly sat down and began to cry. She wept bitterly, shaking all over. My husband is ill, she sobbed out. Stephen Lukic was silent. He slowly sat up, propped his head on his hand, and looked at his visitor with fixed, sleepy eyes. My husband is ill, Nele continued, restraining her sob. For mercy's sake, come quickly. Make haste. Make haste. Oh, groaned the doctor, blowing into his hand. Come this very minute, or it is terrible to think. For mercy's sake. And pale, exhausted, Nelly, gasping and swallowing her tears, began to describing to the doctor her husband is ill. Her unutterable terror, Her suffering would have touched the heart of a stone, but the doctor looked at her, blade in his open hand, and not a moment. I will come tomorrow, he muttered. That's impossible, cried Nelly. I know my husband has typhus. At once, this very minute you are needed. I ever have only just come in, muttered the doctor. For the last 3 days, I have been away seeing typhus patients, and I am exhausted and in myself. I simply can't. Absolutely, I have caught it myself there, and the doctor thrust before her eyes and a clinical thermometer. My temperature is nearly 40. I absolutely can't. I can't scratch the setup. Excuse me, I will lay down. The doctor lay down. But I implore you, doctor, Nele won't in disappear. I beseech you, help me for mercy's sake. Make a great effort and come. I will repay you, doctor. Oh dear, why I have told you already. Oh, Nele leapt up and walked nervously up and down the bedroom. She longed to explain the doctor to bring him to reason. She thought if only he knew how dear her husband was to her and how unhappy she was, he would forget his exhaustion and his illness. But how could she be alert enough? Go to the gemstone, doctor. She heard Stephen Lucky's voice. That's impossible. He lives more than 20 miles from here, and time is precious, and the horses can't stand it. It is a 30 miles from us to you, and as much from here to the gemstone, doctor. No, it's impossible. Come along, Stephen Lukic. I ask of you an heroic deed. Come and perform that heroic deed. Have pity on us. It is beyond everything. I'm in a fever. My head is a while, and she won't understand. Leave me alone. But you are in duty bound to come. You cannot refuse to come. It is annoying. A man is born to sacrifice his life or his neighbors, and you refuse to come. I mean, summon you before the court. Nelly felt that she was uttering a false and underserved insult. But for her husband's sake, she was capable of forgetting logic, tact, sympathy for others. In reply to her threats, the doctor greatly gulped a glass of cold water. Nelly fell to entreating and imploring like the very lowest beggar. At last, the doctor gave away. He slowly got up, puffing and panting, looking for his coat. Here it is, cried Nelly, helping him. Let me put it on too. Come along. I will repay you. All my life I shall be grateful to you. But what agony! After putting on his coat, the doctor lay down again. Nelly got him up and grabbed him to the hall. Then there was an agonizing to do over his clothes, his overcoat. His cap was lost. But at last Nelly was in the carriage with the doctor. Now they had only to drive 30 miles and her husband would have a doctor help. The earth was wrapped in darkness. One could not see one's hand before one's face. A cold winter wind was blowing. There were frozen lumps under their wheels. The coachman was continually stopping and wondering which road to take. Nelly and the doctor sat silent all the way. It was fearfully jolting, but they felt neither the cold nor the jolts. Get down, Nelly implored the driver. At 5 in the morning, the exhausted horses drove into the yard. Nelly saw the familiar gates, the well with the crane, the long row of stable and barn. At last, she was at home. Wait a minute, I will be back directly, she said to Stephen Lukic, making him sit down on the sofa in the dining room. Sit still and wait a little, and I will see how he is going on. On her return from her husband, Nelly found the doctor laying down. He was laying on the sofa and muttering, Doctor, please! Doctor! Oh, asked Jonah, muttered Stephen Lukic. What? They said at the meeting. Vlos said, Who? What? And to her horror, Nelly saw that the doctor was as delirious her husband. What was to be done? I must go for the gemstone doctor, she decided. Then again there followed darkness, a cutting cold wind, lumps of frozen earth. She was suffering in body and soul, and Dilla's nature has no arts, no deceptions, no compassion. This suffering, then she saw against the grey background how her husband every spring was in strain for money to pay, the interest for the mortgage to the bank. He could not sleep, she could not sleep, and both racked their brains till their heads ached, thinking how to avoid being visited by the clerk of the court. She saw her children, the everlasting appearance of colds, scant fever, diphtheria, bad marks. At school, separation out of a brood of 5 or 6, one was sure to die. The grey background was not untouched by death. That night, and that might well be, a husband and wife cannot die simultaneously. Whatever happened, one must bury the other. And Nelly saw her husband dying. This terrible event presented itself to her in every detail. She saw the coffin, the candles, the deacon, and even the footmarks in the hall made by the undertaker. Why is it? What is it for? She asked, looking blankly at her husband's face. And all the previous life with her husband seemed to her a stupid this. Something fell from Nelly's husband and from Nelly's hand and knocked on the floor. She started, jumped up, and opened her eyes wide. One looking glass she saw at her feet. The other was standing as before on the table. She looked into the looking glass and saw a pale, tear-stained face. There was no grey background now. I must have fallen asleep, she thought with a sigh of relief. Thanks for watching.